The Bulls were one of many teams that did not pay the luxury tax last season, and this may be part of why it's expected around the league to have a busy offseason, as teams that did pay the luxury tax last season are going to be looking to avoid that second tax apron, which the more penalizing parts of kick in this season. We're talking about how the Bulls, having Zach LaVine as a priority to move is really motivated by that continued avoidance of the luxury tax. Plus, we're going to look at the best teams reported by Bleacher Report as destinations for DeMar DeRozan, and Nikola Jokic wins his third MVP. We're going to get into all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content for today. And so we want to talk about, the way I'm phrasing this segment is, why is moving Zach LaVine really the number one priority by the Chicago Bulls? And of course, like with most things with this ownership group, it's motivated by money. Now, I know that's not as a shock to anyone, right? The deal that Zach LaVine is on is a huge deal, the largest deal in Chicago Bulls history. And while the Bulls were one of many teams, when you look at it, there are actually only 8 teams last season that paid the luxury tax. So, while a lot of Bulls fans, kind of clamor towards the Bulls to pay the luxury tax again, paying the luxury tax isn't necessarily an indicator of if you're going to be a successful team or not. It's how you allocate and spend your money. But as the Bulls are one of the other 22 teams that did not pay the luxury tax last season, that means they're going to be splitting roughly about 23. Everybody's going to get about roughly $23 million, because teams split the salary cap pool. But with that said, one of the reasons that the Chicago Bulls are probably looking to move Zach LaVine is one of twofold, right? We know that the new rules for the offseason kick in, which is going to, the 2024-25 tax apron is what a lot of teams are going to be looking to avoid, especially that second tax apron. Now, the first apron, which isn't as penalizing, they're going to still be a lot of teams over that, but they're going to be teams looking to avoid that second tax apron. Now, that doesn't affect the Bulls because we weren't even into the first tax apron, so you don't have to worry about that. But where it does start affecting the Bulls is that with Zach LaVine on his max contract, and the cap typically rolls up by exponential numbers, it's not really going to rise as much as what it was before. We already know that the NBA's try to kind of flatten that cap so you're not having the huge jumps each and every season. You are going to still get incremental jumps, which are going to make that salary a little bit easier. But when you look at how it's been reported that the kind of the first, second, and third priority of the Chicago Bulls team is trading Zach LaVine. Now, let's be clear here. Trading Zach LaVine isn't necessarily the need, right? The Bulls could do other things, but in trying to avoid the luxury tax, which is something that has always been there by the Chicago Bulls, and despite AK saying that he does have the okay from ownership to go into the luxury tax if he wants, I don't believe it. I'll believe it when I see it. I've just been around a fan of this franchise entirely too long to believe that Jerry Reinsdorf is going to pay the luxury tax for a team that couldn't even make it out the play-in tournament. And they shouldn't, right? And then, when you add into that the fact that Casey Johnson did say that it's not necessarily the foot surgery, because it was an elected surgery, teams aren't really looking at that foot surgery as something that's really going to hurt Zach LaVine as far as his play on the court. It really comes down to the contract. And the teams that were below the luxury tax last year, with those teams, they have a little bit more spending power, right? They have a little bit more luxury. And that's what you're going to start seeing a lot around the NBA. And I think we're going to start seeing a lot more of teams kind of selling off stars. And I think that's something that's kind of been growing and coming over time for a while now. But with the second tax apron being what it's being, it's going to be mighty, mighty difficult for a lot of these teams to really kind of maneuver. Keep in mind, if you are over that second tax apron, you don't have the ability to allocate salaries to get a larger one back, right? So you can't take a $10 million contract and a $15 million contract and boom, now you're trading for a $25 million player. So, it's the teams that do not pay. And, there were a couple of, there was a Magic fan in the comments yesterday. It was like, well, why would the Magic want to trade for Zach LaVine on that contract when they can go out in free agency and get XYZ? The teams that aren't typically free agent destinations, they are going to have to kind of go through the trade market. And this upcoming season, there could be a lot of players available to be sold off. Now, they're not all going to be stars. Teams are going to be looking to try to keep their stars if they can. But those same teams are could also be looking to pivot, right? And maybe even trade off a couple of larger contracts that are just kind of role players and things like that. Contracts and players that maybe other teams can use desperately on their team. And even though they're a little bit overpaid, in the case of Zach LaVine, some people will say a lot of bit overpaid, but I think Zach's not that far off from his value. He just got to stay healthy and actually focus on the court. But the movement of Zach LaVine, like with most things with this Bulls team, when it comes down to it, it goes back to money. Now, in the case of Zach LaVine, I could understand it a little bit more. A $40 million contract for a team that, had an above 500 record without him, and finished the season on a pace above 500, even though they didn't finish with an above 500 record, that you have to seriously start looking at those things and asking about the value, right? And, even in me talking about like Ryan Poles and the way that he addressed the needs of the Chicago Bears, it's always about value, right? There's an equal number of value that he views that player at in the contract, and he tries to get it as close to what that value is. And if not, he tries to move on from it. So this is a change in mindset in a degree, right? Because we know now that continuity isn't going to be something you can just hold on to. I went over a couple of episodes ago why continuity really is not an option for the Chicago Bulls this offseason. It just isn't. It's just continuity can't really be a thing as far as bringing everyone back the exact same. Now, you can bring most of the roster back, but we're going to have to take some serious changes to it. And so when you hear also the things about Lonzo, that plays also into the Lonzo Ball situation, right? And while it's so much of a conversation over potentially waiving and stretching Lonzo Ball because it helps avoid that luxury tax while giving you, paired with another move, a little bit more flexibility in that as well. So it's an interesting scenario to be in. But I was really kind of not caught off guard, but I was surprised to see that not that many teams pay the luxury taxes. The way that Bulls fans complain about the luxury tax, and I know not every Bulls fan is in the weeds, right? Hell, there's some Bulls fans that have talked to me in comment section and stuff and said, hey, I didn't even realize that there was a difference between being over the salary cap and the luxury tax. And no knock to them on that one. Like, not everybody's going to be able to stay and know that. But so there was $524 million paid in tax penalties last season. That's crazy when you look at it. The fact that only 8 teams paid that money, like, that's ridiculous. And so it's going to be very interesting to see how these teams, when you look at a team like Boston Celtics, $39 million over the luxury tax. The Denver Nuggets, $22 million. Now, if they keep winning titles, I don't think they're going to be worried about that. The Golden State Warriors, $176 million of a tax penalty. The LA Clippers, $142 million of a tax penalty. The Milwaukee Bucks, $52 million in a tax penalty. Right? The Phoenix Suns, $68 million. There are teams out there paying tons of money to just have rosters that disappointed in a lot of ways. Now, one could say that those rosters, the fact that they had a chance, right, and they have stars on them, are in a much better place than the Bulls are. But it's just going to be, like I said, continue to be interesting. And the more and more I look over numbers and things like that over this new second tax apron and things like that, it's going to be, I kind of underestimated, just being 100% honest, I underestimated just how serious it is with teams paying this luxury tax and how penalizing it's going to be, man. 8 teams to pay that much money over the luxury tax for 8 teams? Oh, that's less than half your league. That's less than a third of your league is spending that type of money. It's really eye-opening. So it comes down to it, like the Zach LaVine situation, man. It seems like everything that we're hearing, Zach LaVine's all but a goner in Chicago. And it comes with its own both positives and negatives, because it's not Zach LaVine's fault that this front office couldn't find the roster. And I think some Bulls fans blame Zach LaVine when he didn't make the roster decisions. He didn't have the inability to be active at trade deadlines. He didn't lock this team into the contracts that this team was locked into. That was the front office. And that is why AK taking ownership of it in that season-ending press conference and saying that it is on him was something that we needed to hear. It's something that we all knew, right? If you pay attention to this team, you know that that's on the front office. You know that the front office is the one that built this team, but it's good to at least hear. Now let's see how you're going to go out and fix it. And one of the big steps, first steps in fixing it, is also to figure out what's going on with DeMar DeRozan. We've talked a lot about the rumored 2-year, $80 million contract that was offered to DeMar DeRozan $40 million per, which seemingly was turned down by DeMar. We don't know if DeMar wants more money for less years or if he wants more years at a little bit less money. We don't exactly know that. All speculation around either way. But Bleacher Report had an article, and they talked about some of the best team fits for DeMar DeRozan. And I want to talk about those here because some of these make sense, some of them don't. The first one on the list was the 76ers. Now, I've talked very heavily about the Philadelphia 76ers here and their situation, the fact that they are going into next season with just a handful of players under contract and more flexibility than probably any other team because they have to fledge out a full roster. And right now, guess what? They don't have anywhere close to a semblance of a full roster. So because of that, the 76ers are going to be mentioned as a destination for a lot of free agents. You're going to hear the 76ers name floated around a lot this offseason by reporters, by writers, by agents as well, because that could be used as leverage. The Philadelphia 76ers, when you look at their salary cap situation next year, they have tons and tons of cap space. They have $106 million under the first tax apron and $72 million of true potential cap space that they can use. Now, part of that's going to be taken up by them picking up Tyrese Maxey's option. That's going to be picked up. They're going to have to figure out a way to re-sign Tyrese Maxey. But outside of that, it's Joel Embiid, Paul Reed, Jeff Doughton, who doesn't even have a guaranteed deal. It's a club option deal, and Ricky Consul IV. That's it. That's the players that the Philadelphia 76ers have under contract next season. And Paul Reed is the highest there at $7 million. The other two players have $2 million and $1.8 million respectively. So the Philadelphia 76ers are a team, like I said, you're going to hear them in the mix potentially of a lot of free agents. I wouldn't be surprised if most free agents take a meeting with the Philadelphia 76ers to put some pressure on the teams that they're currently with to kind of force a re-signing. It's a possibility there. There's also a possibility that the Philadelphia 76ers could strike out on every single major free agent target that they have on their board. And if they do, they could pivot. They could pivot to trading for like a Zach LaVine. They could pivot to signing a veteran like DeMar DeRozan. At that point, it's not even just about looking at fit with Joel Embiid, right? Which I think Joel Embiid and DeMar could fit well together. But it is about, period, just the fact that they have the most cap space, right? And that they can get active. And because they have a former MVP in Joel Embiid, that's going to help them try to get those players around them. So, you know, it's the Philadelphia 76ers being on the list as one of these teams that could make a move for DeMar DeRozan. It doesn't surprise me. Next up is the Los Angeles Lakers. And again, this isn't one that surprised anybody as well either, in them being interested in either Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan. And that just comes down to, again, the rumored interest there from both parties. The fact that DeMar DeRozan thought a deal was done with the Lakers before signing with the Chicago Bulls. All that stuff is there. Now, the Lakers can have up to $28 million in cap space. That would mean that they would have to decline any options and anything that they have on any other players. The problem with them doing that potentially is, all right, how are you going to fill out the rest of your roster? Now, the Lakers aren't a team that aren't going to be afraid to pay over the luxury tax. We just know that. That's not even an issue with them. They could be drastically over that, even though they were only $798,000 above the first apron last season. With that, I was surprised that the Lakers had that low of payroll. But there is some mutual interest there. I would think that if DeMar DeRozan can't reach a deal with the Chicago Bulls, that going to the Lakers is a possibility there. It depends on then how do they get him in there. That's the bigger question that you have to ask yourself there. So that's where the Lakers sit right now in what they have going on next season. So, it really comes down to just how aggressive the Lakers want to be after going after an older player like DeMar. Now, if LeBron stays there, of course, that could be something that helps facilitate that and could make their interest in DeMar a little bit higher, but we'll have to see on that. And then the last one that they had on this list was the Miami Heat. Now, the Miami Heat are interesting because of a few different reasons. We know that Pat Riley recently made the comments about Jimmy Butler, about being on the sidelines and being quiet if he's on the sidelines, but there's also been some hesitation on the Miami Heat's part to pay Jimmy Butler the max. And what happens then if you don't? And Jimmy Butler does opt out of his contract because he does have an option next year, and the Miami Heat don't re-sign him. They could be looking to then pivot towards a player like a DeMar DeRozan to pair with Bam and to try to keep things going. But you never really know. Pat Riley's one of those guys who's always going to be aggressive, so you don't know for sure what's going to happen with Pat Riley, but that decision on Jimmy Butler, and if he opts out of that player option, which the player option actually is until 25, 26. So they have an additional year there. That's my fault. There's an additional year there. I'm kind of ahead of myself. So are they going to be looking to kind of add a DeMar DeRozan to help? Then and maybe what could be Jimmy Butler's final year to go at it for a title, kind of change my points on that one. And that's what you got to look at. So the Miami Heat, the future of Jimmy really does impact the Eastern Conference, because one or two things could happen when Jimmy Butler does, if he does eventually opt out, or him and the Miami Heat part ways. The Miami Heat are always going to be aggressive. They're always going to try to compete. And because of that, it can make it real interesting on them aggressively going after some free agents. But I guess we'll see there. But all those teams kind of make sense in their own right for DeMar DeRozan. Not that it's an exclusive list and it's only those three teams, but I do look at it and say there's some merit to each one of those teams potentially wanting to go after DeMar. It just comes down to they're not going to probably offer DeMar what the Bulls would offer to keep him, which then makes it more interesting on, is it that DeMar just wants to get out, which hasn't been what he said. He's talked about even wanting to retire a Chicago Bull. So there's some questions around what that could mean. But, again, as with most things this offseason, we won't know until we know. And maybe the draft lottery on Sunday helps clarify some things. Maybe. Maybe it makes things a little bit more confusing. I don't know, but we'll end up seeing what happens there. Before we go, I do want to talk about one thing. That's Nikola Jokic winning his third MVP. He joins other three-time MVP winners in Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, LeBron James, Magic Johnson, Larry Bird, Moses Malone, and then you have Nikola Jokic there, joining an exclusive list of players. Only 9 players that have won 3 or more MVPs. Mike got 5. Kareem got 6. But, it is what it is there. But, this was something that it stirred up a lot of conversation. People looked at Luka Doncic. They looked at Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. For my money, I would have loved to see Shai win the MVP. I just look at what he was on that team and how good that team was overall in that season, averaging over 30 points per game again this season. And when you watch Shai, it's also the fact that Shai gives it on the defensive side of the ball as well, right? His second straight year, averaging over 30 points per game. Shai is just a player that continues to refine it. Had a better shooting percentage this year in both 3-point and field goal percentage, which that means that he just refined his game. He actually took less shots than what he did last season, and averaged only 1 less point per game as well. So Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, to me, is a player that you can only keep away for winning an MVP for so long. He's going to win one, and that's going to come probably off the backs of the OKC Thunder just keep turning and developing these players and turning more and more into a modern, well-built, organically built super team in a lot of ways. But I wanted to bring that conversation over here. How do you guys feel about Nikola Jokic winning his third MVP in a row? Do you think, like me, that it should have gone to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? Do you think it should have gone to Luka Doncic? Or do you think that, and that's not to say that Jokic hasn't also earned another MVP. It's just, to me, it's like, hey, I just like what Shai did better this season, personally. That's my personal opinion. I love watching Shai Gilgeous-Alexander play. He's one of my favorite players to watch play that's not a Chicago Bull as well. And you look at them finishing with the best record in the Western Conference, tied that with the Denver Nuggets, right? Being a young team, an up-and-coming team, how Shai also just overall impacts winning for that teams and plays defense, kicks up that defensive intensity when he needs to as well. To me, Shai should have won that MVP, but I want to hear from you guys down below on that. Who do you think should have won the MVP this year in 2023-24? And who do you think is the front runner next year to win it? Do you think, like me, it's only a matter of time before Shai wins the MVP? It's coming. He's going to win an MVP at some point. I'm going to be happy for the young man if he does. Hopefully at some point we can get a Bulls player so that we can have a legitimate conversation on should he have won MVP. It's been a long time since that's happened. But let me know what you guys think on all that down below. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.